If you go to any growth point, if you go to any city, town in Zimbabwe, everyone is vending.
Yeah.
How are you going to approach that in your first 100 days?
Yeah, well, you know what? I heard someone say something really interesting, and it was Sten Zorwadza, who is the chairman of the Vendors Association, that it's time now for us to change what we call these people, because there are a lot of negative names that are used for vendors. These are our entrepreneurs. These are these are people who have a very, very serious commitment to making ends meet. And it's time to empower the informal sector in this country. Well, this question of vendors, someone said something interesting recently, and it was Sten Zorwadza, the chairperson of the Vendors Association. He says, sometimes we demean these people by giving them names like Magweja. In fact, he was talking about the informal sector as a whole, not just vendors. And in fact, in the end, we convince ourselves that they're a nuisance. But these are people who are, trying to make ends meet, And a lot of them do it in very, very creative ways as well. And it's time we started looking at them as entrepreneurs and the builders of tomorrow's institutions and industries. So what is it that we need to do in the first 100 days? Make sure that we can find ways of creating capital pools to help those people who are in the informal sector and capacitate them so that they can move from the informal sector into the formal sector. In fact, if you look in our manifesto, we talk about setting up this fund, particularly to support artisanal miners, which is almost $500 million, and another $300 million fund, innovation fund for young people to turn their innovative ideas into projects and companies and so on. That's very, very critical. And I know that there is support out there for those kinds of things. We are going to build our economy from the inside out, not just from people coming in and investing in our country, but by actually helping those people who are already in. So, for instance, what would you rather have? There's a guy at CSO right now who's making window frames and door frames. What would you rather have? Find capital to actually support this person so that they can increase what they are doing and build an entity that provides even more employment, or get somebody to come from outside and establish a company that puts that person out of business. I think what we want is a combination actually of these two things, where you support indigenous people who are doing things at a small scale, and you also bring in others who can do the things that we are not doing ourselves at a local level. And there's a partnership between FDI and indigenous initiatives.
We have seen the previous government looking east. Where is the government going to look?
Good question. Look, in fact, this really is a very, very good question, because what we don't realize a lot of times is that every government it does what is in the best interest of its people. China built the AU headquarters in Ethiopia so that it would have an inside track when it comes to relationships with African governments, so that when it comes to signing deals and all of that, it would be at an advantage over others. And you can't blame them for that. They're doing that in the interest of their countries. We need to develop the kind of foreign policy that puts Zimbabweans first. That's very, very important. And wherever that leads, whatever relationships that leads to, that's fine. But, you can't just say, we're going to look east. The Chinese come in here and, you sign deals with them where they bring their wheelbarrows and their hose pipes and everything. And they bring the labor and so on. And it's to our disadvantage. And at the end of the day, when they've built whatever they've built, we still owe them money. These people are not stupid. They don't do things in your interest necessarily, but they do things in their national interest. So wherever our national interest leads us in terms of international relations, that's where we'll look.